Episode 3, The Acolyte, just came out. Holy crap, was it awful. The show just jumped off a cliff this episode. So the entire episode is a flashback. They make the Force literally female, lame, and gay, with the girls having lesbian moms and some kind of immaculate conception. The lesbian witches are also being attacked by society. I'll go ahead and say I think a lot of this episode is supposed to be some kind of trans kids allegory. I don't know if that sounds crazy. I don't particularly care. Everyone who created the show made it clear how they felt about it. They don't care about Star Wars, and their priority is not storytelling.
I would say arguably the gayest Star Wars, I think, by a considerable margin. And
when people watch The Hate You Give, what do you want them to walk away with?
Well, I mean, white people crying actually was the goal.
this is going to be a talking point.
Is it going to be a talking point?
I'm sure some.
Because nerds are gay.
Well, some nerds are very not gay and are very threatened by gay
Well, that's true.
The idea that, like, when you're hiring a director, that everyone is sitting in there waiting for George Lucas and not for the person who's going to know to hire Ralph McQuarrie, that's the problem. That's the misogyny and the problem with the auteur myth.
But in my world, nerds are gay.
Okay.
People have told me that it's the gayest Star Wars, and I frankly...
You're offended?
Into it. No.
Put everything into it. I had to put all of the love that I have for the franchise, but also all of my own personal experience.
I think that Star Wars is so gay already.
Okay.
And are you telling me, with a straight face, that C-3PO is straight?
They're a couple. That's what I think.
You can see yourself as the bad guy and there's still good in you, and you can see yourself as the good guy and there's still a little bit of bad. And that's something I hoped to imbue into the story.
I think it's canon that R2-D2 is a lesbian.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
This episode made no sense on any level. If it's trying to set up for a twist later, I'm pretty sure that they've written themselves into a corner in a way that the twist can't even make sense. I don't want to be too mean because it's a little girl, but this whole episode hinged on her acting, and she's simply not a good actress. Everything about this episode was miserable. We got a kind of retconning of the Force. None of the characters' motivations really make much sense. Let's just get into it. So we start off 16 years ago. You can see the little girls. Osha doesn't like living in this coven where they live like the top of a mountain and wants to leave and possibly become a Jedi. And May wants to stay there, and she's pissed off that Osha wants to leave. She's also kind of crazy and enjoys torturing these little alien butterfly things. They get lectured by one of their moms, even though it seems like they live literally in the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere. And then we see Squid Game, aka Soul when he's young, spying on them. So I just wanted to show this image real quick so you can see where their coven is. It looks like they carved a dam into the side of the mountain. No clue how that happened or why they'd ever worry about someone finding them, but that's where we are. We can see the two moons in the background. They're also the O in the title, and they match the twins. So there you go. Symbolism. Here you go. Here's the moms of the twins. The one on the right is like the head witch of this place. The one on the left is the one that gave birth to them. The one on the right says that she created them because they have an argument later in the episode. So they go full blown here with giving up on subtlety. So I just wanted to show this so you could see what I'm talking about. So we get this whole lecture here about the thread, which is the Force. Like she literally says some people call it the Force. And then when she describes it, they interact with it just like the Force. The only kind of difference is she talks about how it connects and binds them all. And once they perform this ascension, which is like the whole episode that they're talking about, that you can't break the thread. So they're tied together forever. But then she also talks about tugging on the thread and changing destiny. Obviously, we've seen in other Star Wars media where they talk about the future changing or it's unclear, blah, blah, blah. So really, they just wanted to have a different word for it and make this better and more powerful than everybody else uses the Force, I guess, because they're witches. So she talks about how the Force can't be wielded and then proceeds to do essentially what looks like a Force push on these two girls as a demonstration. And also, the two twins aren't really paying attention at all. So I'm not sure what the point of this is, other than just more naked exposition so that we know what they call the Force and how they believe it. But presumably, these girls are going to their ascension or whatever. They already know this shit. It seems like they already can use the Force the way that they talk. And we see them use the Force in the opening scene in the woods. So this is just more of that direct exposition for the audience when the characters should already know all this shit. And now they're about to do this ascension ceremony. And the head witch gives this big speech about how they've been persecuted and had to go into hiding because the way that they use power is viewed as dark by some, i.e. the Jedi. all really subtle. If I didn't point it out to you, you'd never see the parallels between the views of the people who created this show and how they view the persecution of homosexuals in America and the West. They totally didn't just campaign on this show being diverse and gay.
A part of the wave that is ushering in inclusion and safety for Black nerds.
And I'm sure they definitely don't think that anyone who doesn't support them wants them imprisoned or executed. I mean, it's just so on the nose. It's unbelievable to me. At no point in this fucking episode is Star Wars the priority. She uses the word unnatural also. Again, just more virtue signaling bullshit. Because obviously this parallels real life, where the evangelical right calls homosexuality unnatural. But that's obviously what this is signaling to. And this is all super cringy and dragged out. The episode is listed at like 42-minute runtime, but without the credits and the recap, you're looking at like 35 minutes maybe. And then you get a scene like this that probably lasts like 3 minutes of just howling and witch music, and they're all dancing and being fucking weird, awful, cringe as shit. Nothing about this feels like Star Wars. I don't want to hear shit about the fucking Night Sisters. You know, it's one thing to have people use the Force in different ways and call it different things, but when you keep adding shit to it and making it more powerful, at some point it's just magic, and they're just going to use it however they need to for the plot, which is seemingly what they're doing here. Because they never actually explain what any of this shit is. They just say some people view it as bad. And then May ends up with some weird mark on her forehead that we kind of saw at a glance in episode 1. And they keep talking about the power of many. Again, it's all women. Strong women unite. Rah, rah, no one gives a fuck. I just wanted to point it out because this shit is just nonstop this episode. So in the middle of the ceremony, before Osha can get her mark, the Jedi show up and it interrupts the ceremony. But before I can even talk about how stupid this fucking scene is, the witches go to defend themselves with bows and arrows. And they talk about hunting and how they hunt with bows sometimes. And it's like, why the fuck are Force users using bows and arrows? Like, we literally see them use the Force. We see the little girl, like, freezing the butterfly alien thing to torture it. So they have the Force. Why do they need what look to be medieval bows and arrows to go hunting? And I don't really even understand how this whole thing works anyway. Because they have, like, a little town inside the fortress, is what they call it. But there's only like 50 of them. So none of the logistics of this really make any sense. I know they might not necessarily have lightsabers, but why the fuck would they have old school bow and arrows? So this scene with the Jedi is insane. The Jedi are acting like Child Protective Services. They show up and lie right away. Trinity says that they thought the planet was empty, even though they happen to find this base, knowing that there's Force-wielding kids. And then she starts threatening them, saying that they have the right, as part of Republic law, to ask kids to be tested for Padawans. And she's essentially threatening these witches. The witch says they're not in the Republic, which Trinity already knew. And then Trinity says, we have the right to test them, with your permission, of course. So this whole thing could just be ended if the mother witch lady just says, no, I'm the child's second mom or father, or whatever the fuck she is. The answer is no. Osha and May at this point are 10. They pop out, and Osha says, I want to be a Jedi. And instead of the mom saying, okay, you're not old enough to make that decision, she gives her permission to. And this episode, I'm sure there'll be more to it, because they're going to try to do some kind of twist. But as of now, the impetus for May's revenge makes no fucking sense. And if the witches really hate the Jedi that much, they could just kill them. They say it over and over. Like, we have them way outnumbered. There's only 4 of them. And the head witch lady possesses Torben, a.k.a. Tommen from Game of Thrones. He was a kid then. He got to see Natalie Dormer topless in real life, little bastard. Anyway, he gets, like, possessed by her, and the witch lady threatens to destroy his mind. So, like, clearly they have the Force potential and weaponry to just overwhelm them if they want to. But all this could just be resolved if they just say, no, we're not letting them be tested. That's our decision. And if they try to twist this later, because the way it's filmed, I'm suspecting that they're going to try to make this where the Jedi burn everything down at the end of the episode and not May, then they've made the Jedi evil, child-stealing psychopaths. So at this point, I don't really see a way that this story can be resolved with any of the world building intact, or the story for this season. The reason I say I think this episode is an allegory for trans kids, which, to be clear, I would never say that without all the meta stuff surrounding this show, where they're calling it the gayest show ever, where Leslie Headland says the show is about her and the shitty relationship she has with her sister. The fact that Leslie Headland worked for 6 years at Miramax, 4 of which were as Harvey Weinstein's personal assistant. It's up on the screen for you so you can see it takes a 2-second Google search. So let's not pretend like she's not familiar with fucking grooming. And then everything around this, the way it's framed in the show, is the black mom is saying she's old enough to make this choice for herself. She's roughly 10 years old at this point in the show. The mom who's being portrayed as the violent, kind of rowdy bitch is saying, I didn't bring them into this world to have them taken away by some deranged monk. So all of this to me just reeks of a very on-the-nose allegory for what they believe. And like I said, I know it sounds deranged, but with the context of everything around this show, I don't care. Like if their priority is to talk about LGBTQ lifestyle, then this kind of thing is a pretty important part of the conversation for their ideology. So the idea of letting a child make a life-altering decision like this, to me, seems like a pretty blatant parallel. If you want to disagree, fine. This is how it seems to me. This is where they have their lovers spat. The white witch says, I carried them. And the black mom lady says, I created them. And the white witch lady says, what if they find out about how you created them? Again, they keep referencing vague shit. I don't think we'll get answers. If we do, I think it's just going to boil down to force magic and not be a very satisfying answer. So really, they've written themselves into a lot of bad spots with this episode. Here's where we get that gem line from the trailer. It's not about good and bad. It's about power and who gets to use it. I would just call it Marxism. Power is the only thing that matters. There's not really any principles underlying it. I'm not going to go on a fucking tirade about Marxism, but it's all power dynamics and it's all oppressor versus oppressed. And then if you believe you're the oppressed, anything you do is justified. So I don't know fully where the story is going, but that's kind of what this ideology is based in. And it's such a fundamental misunderstanding of Star Wars. Like Star Wars has always been one of those stories where it's just good versus evil. Kind of like Lord of the Rings. You don't need sympathetic orcs. You don't need sympathetic Sith. They can have interesting characters and arcs and whatever. But at the end of the day, the Jedi are the balance. The Sith are the problem.
A battle for power. I mean, the best parts about Star Wars is there is no good or evil.
The Sith use extreme emotions, a lot of them anger-based, jealousy-based, tragedy-based, to power themselves. There's no need to complicate it. There's no need to try to muddy the waters and say, oh, the Jedi are bad. This is all just shitting right on the face of Star Wars and its fans. And also, if that's really her belief, that it's not about good and bad, it's about power, what does that say about her relationship with these girls? When she's calling herself their mother or father or whatever the fuck she's supposed to be, creator, that she views them as a means to power. And then aside from all that, this is where she says, in the winter we hunt with bunta, in the summer we hunt with bows and arrows. Not sure why your hunting tools would change. I'm sure it's supposed to be based on the animal, but I don't really see a difference in poison or poison darts and bows and arrows. They're both ranged weapons. And again, I'm not sure why they wouldn't just be hunting with the Force. They're clearly at least decently powerful with it. So the mom tells them that they need to go take the test, but lie. Pretend like they don't see the things they're supposed to see, and the Jedi won't take them, and they won't have to leave forever. And then just a little thing here where they make Padawan Tommen a dick. He just takes a surprise blood sample, and she's like, ow, what'd you just do to me?
Surprise, motherfucker.
Instead of just being a normal human and being like, stick out your arm, this might sting, and trying to be endearing. Just more ways for them to make the Jedi look like assholes, I guess. And then here we get what I would say is one of the worst constructed scenes in the show. Even there is a decent little moment here, the whole philosophy of this just undermines everything. So she lies in the first two, and Soul looks at Trinity, and Squid Game looks at Trinity like she's way wrong, but it says correct. And then on the second one, he says correct again. And she goes, but that wasn't a mountain. And obviously she revealed that she knew what it was, so he tricked her.
Gotcha, bitch.
But then he immediately follows this with, you have to be brave enough to tell the truth. So within the last 5-10 minutes of showtime, Trinity lied about why they were at the Coven. Squid Game, Trinity also lied about their authority. She lied about them having jurisdiction in that area. And then Squid Game lied to her about the test because it was convenient for him. And this is the big lesson on being brave enough to tell the truth. It's this kind of shit that almost seems like trolling. And it makes you wonder if anybody in the writer's room had ever written a script before. Or did they just bring in somebody, one draft, fucking good to go? And the reason I said that there's a little moment in here that I do like is I like the idea of him tricking her into admitting that she can see what's on the screen. That's a nice little thing. But the rest of the scene is just dog shit. Kind of undermines all that. And again, makes the Jedi look like they don't really have principles. They don't have beliefs. I don't know if I would take it to this degree, but deception is like one of the core tenets of a Sith. It's like one of the things they really prioritize to get ahead and get power. And you have the Jedi deceiving and lying to a little girl. And again, I still think this is kind of along the lines of the trans kid allegory. He talks to her about how he took the test when he was 4 and he knew he was different from his family, but he had to have the courage to make the decision that was best for him, even though he was never going to see him again. And if you really want to take that allegory to the extreme, you could say it's a metaphor for becoming a different person, i.e. transitioning. Like you go to the authority, the psychologist or doctor, come back with a new name, you're a new person, blah, blah, blah. Don't know. Either I'm correct or it's a lot of coincidences that lead me down the same path, or I'm just looking way too far into it and giving them too much credit. Even here, this conversation also feels like it to me. She comes back, her whole family's upset with her. The white mom is trying to insist that they use Jedi mind tricks on her. May says, I told them I wanted to be a Jedi because I do. And the white mom says, you don't mean that. And she says, I do mean it. I want my own life. You know, if they come out and say that that's not what this is, that none of this is a metaphor for trans kid shit or trans shit in general, I guess I would let it go. But I don't think that's going to happen because I think that's exactly what this is. This whole thing to me feels like the way that they're treating her is the way that an unaccepting family would treat a kid coming out as homosexual or trans or whatever. And she says, I don't want to be a witch. And May starts screaming, what's wrong with you? And attacks her, continuing with that line of thought. And then the good mom, who's supportive, says destiny isn't chosen for you by some anonymous force. If you want to make that decision, make it. So, yeah. And this is where I said they've really written themselves into a corner if they're going to try to do a twist later. Because May shoves Osha into this room and locks her in there. Why they have a room like this, I don't know. And steals her little book that she was drawing in, sets it on fire, and then burns down the entire place that they live, which is made out of at the top of a mountain, and everything looks like it's stone and metal. So I have no clue how this little book fire burned down the whole fortress. From what we see, and it is filmed a little bit weird, it looks like May burned down the entire thing, and she's the one who got everyone killed. I don't really see a way they can make her revenge story functional, because if that's all there is to it, then she killed everyone and is blaming them and is just crazy. And if there is something where the Jedi actually spread the fire and slaughtered the witches, then the Jedi are just fucking psychos. So either way, I don't think this can work. The fact that it all burns down makes no sense. And the fact that we don't see any lightsaber wounds on the bodies makes me think that this is it. So everything's on fire, fastest fire ever. Osha picks this lock on the wall that goes to some sewer tunnel or something. I have no idea. And she crawls through to escape. And when she gets into this tunnel, everything is blown up. Like this big thing on the left catches fire and explodes. And then her and May have a stare down across a bridge with a gap in it. So they're both standing on this bridge that's falling apart, yelling at each other. Osha is on the left, May's on the right. And you can see Squid Game has just turned the corner because he was looking for both of them. And he isn't able to get there in time for May, so he only catches Osha. So now going back to episode 1 and 2, why would he feel any guilt about her dying? He was literally doing what he could to save them and just couldn't find them. Absurd. 16 years later for a Jedi to not be able to get over that. I'm sure there's people they fail to save all the time. It's sort of the nature of being a Jedi or a cop or whatever they're supposed to be in this fucking story. Child Protective Services, I don't fucking know.
You know, I think this was the golden age of the Jedi, and they're going to get a chance to see that. So, very exciting.
So we see all the witches here, and I watched it a couple times and paused. I can't see any lightsaber wounds or anything, and all their bodies are like right next to each other. As far as I can tell, the fire actually did kill them. How they can have the Force and get killed by a fire, I have no idea. Seems ridiculous to me, but world building in this show is a phrase that's not fucking existent. So here you go. You can see the whole place is burning down. May fell into a big ass hole, and Squid Game escaped with Osha. And Osha says what happened after she waked up. Squid Game says May started a fire. So again, if he's lying, then there's not really any redemption for him. And it's also contradictory to all the shit he was spouting and just being a Jedi in general. And if he's telling the truth, May's story just makes no sense. Part of me thinks they might try to do some Fight Club bullshit. If that's what they're doing, it's incredibly poorly done already. To do the unreliable narrator thing, and I'll explain in a minute why. So we go to the yellow tree we saw earlier. We see May staying at the tree. She says Osha, and she's upset. And the reason I said if they're trying to do an unreliable narrator thing, it's already kind of broken, is because they're showing her separate on her own at the tree. So like, yeah, the tree could just be metaphorical or imaginary or whatever. Like when they've shown her in both places at once, and we've seen all that repeatedly already in 2 episodes. I don't think they can really do that in a way that makes sense. But this is the end of the episode. I think anybody who was on board with the first 2 episodes, which, spoiler alert, wasn't many fucking people, I can't imagine how many people would still be on board after this one. This episode was horrendous. They've essentially retconned the Force. They're doing some weird immaculate conception, lesbian mom conception thing. I don't know if we're going to get explained. As of right now, May's motivations for revenge make no sense. Really, nothing about the story makes sense. I think the message they were trying to send was much more important. So yeah, this show is disastrous. The ratings they had for the first week were already the worst for Star Wars by over 30%, which the previous worst was Ahsoka. They were down from 14 million to 11 million viewers for the first week. And this is their biggest budget Star Wars show. The part that I will say I was right about was I said that the first 2 episodes are probably the best ones and they would just get worse. And I think that's where we're headed. And I think the prediction that one of those witches, maybe the White Witch, because we didn't see her body, will be, as Mueller has dubbed him, Smilo Ren, or the Master, whatever you want to call him. I think there's a pretty good chance of that now. I think the reality is Star Wars is dead, not coming back anytime soon.
I say that because I'm not a toilet bowl you sit on and shit on. I'm not here to eat your fucking shit. You fucking got that?
Kind of a bummer, but until they start prioritizing storytelling and world building and characters again, we're stuck with shit like this. All right, I'm going to leave it there. If you've seen the episode or the show, let me know what you think. If you disagree with me and tell me in the comments why about my interpretation, I'll gladly respond as long as you're not just insulting me. Beyond that, I've started live streaming on Sundays if you're interested. Like and subscribe and all that. Thanks. See ya.